Yo, 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 visualize shark takes, hit the wave grinding. In the chat, gun shark odds make it rhyming. Sunday vibes, smooth bets, no confining. Hats engaged, can't stop us from shining. Bet on the spread, liking it, keep it tight. Push the odds further, jack on the hindsight. Odds fellows mind grasping the right sight. Hats, caps on heads, winners in plain sight. Hit the light, get in the chat, feel the flow, cash it, every dollar see the bank roll. Sunday grinding picks, now you gotta know. Extra points on the screen, sharp minds always glow. Big parlays, predictions we home. Standing tall, betting knowledge all.
On a suddenly not so casual Sunday in December, it is NFL The Extra Points, the big show, week 14, Sunday, December 8th, 2024, the Shark and the Gun, right here live on Sharky Waters Nation, X and YouTube, and the Guns Picks channel. Jump in the chat. We're getting a little late start here. Guns and I are already hyped off the air. Hope you guys had a great Saturday night. Let's cash this Sunday. Guns, what's going on, brother?
Man, beautiful Sunday because we have the selection of the college football playoff. But we're not here to talk about college football. We're here to talk about the NFL. And, man, do we have a beautiful slate. We got props, we got totals, we got sides, and it is going to be an electric time on this Week 14 Sunday. Shark, I'm ready to give it to the people. Let's go.
1 o'clock in Nashville. The beauty of sports betting, turning one of the worst games on the slate into a financial endeavor. 2-10 Jags, 0-6 on the road, 3-9 Titans, 1-4 at home. Backup quarterback Mac Jones, the elusive one for the Jags. Maybe not so elusive today after a backdoor last week against Houston. First official of the broadcast, throwing it to the Gun, under 40.
Yeah, if you're going to play with this one, I think it's going to be with the total, and I like the under in this one. You have a Tennessee team that's 3-9 on the year versus a Jacksonville team that is 2-10 on the year. You got to look at both offenses, though, when you look at this cap. You have the Jacksonville offense that's ranked 25th in offensive scoring, only putting up 19 points per game. They're 28th in offensive yards per game as well. And then you got Tennessee on the offensive side. They're 28th in offensive scoring, only putting up 18.4 points per game. And on the defensive side, yes, both teams have been vulnerable against their opponents, giving up 28.3 points per game for Jacksonville. That's ranked 29th in the league and 27th in the league for Tennessee. But with Tennessee, they don't give up a lot of yards. They just gave up a lot of points. They're actually second in opposing yards per game. Tennessee has worse numbers at home, but they have actually done well on the road as far as Jacksonville puts up 16 points per game at home versus putting 20 on the road. So this is Tennessee playing at home today. So you know there's going to be regression in their scoring. Then Jacksonville on the polar opposite, putting up more points at home than they do on the road. So they're worse on the road in terms of scoring. Jacksonville puts up 18 points per game on the road versus 21 at home. Both teams have struggled scoring in the last 4 games as well. Tennessee, 20 points per game versus Jacksonville, putting up 14 points per game in the last 4. And then the under is 4-1 this season when Tennessee home games, where this total is the second lowest Tennessee has seen all season. And with the Jacksonville side, this is the lowest total they've seen all season in all their games. Jacksonville, typically an over team, 6-2 to the over in their last 8. But I think this is going to be a low-scoring game with 2 bad teams. Of course, no Trevor Lawrence in this one. It's going to be Mac Jones. And you want to trust Mac Jones to score points, go right ahead. 4 out of the last 5 in this matchup have gone over as well, but you still have this low total. It's telling everything that this is going to be an under. So give me Jacksonville, Tennessee, under the total 40 as the play.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with this take. Last year, they did go over in the most recent matchup. It was actually the last game of the year, Week 18 last season. Trevor Lawrence, trying to get to the playoffs, actually got stoned on 4th and goal with a sneak to try to tie the game. But the game did finish 28-20. And as Guns mentioned, that was really symptomatic to a totally different environment for Jacksonville last year. This is Mac Jones. As I said, 2 late touchdowns last week, 1 on 4th down, a total prayer. That's not how Mac played in some of his other regular season games this year. Most notably, a 7-point final result against Minnesota a few weeks ago. Multiple interceptions. Tennessee defense will improve, and the Jags will compete in this divisional matchup. An official from the Gun, under 40. My first official on this beautiful Sunday, 1 o'clock in North Miami, Miami Gardens, Florida, Hard Rock Stadium, taking the Jets Dolphins over 44.5. And this truly is a beautiful buy low in terms of both teams' environments here. The Jets are 5-7 versus the over. They started 1-5. They are 4-2 since. They are 3-2 versus the road over. Did go over outside of the division against San Francisco, Pittsburgh, and did go over in their only divisional road game at New England recently, 25-22. And the key point here, their unders on the road, the defense actually gave up 24 points per game. The Jets offense just didn't score, particularly in a game 31-6 loss at Arizona. That went under. It could have easily gone over. And speaking of that defense, we came into last year and this year thinking Robert Saleh, ex-defensive coordinator, one of the best defenses in the league. Saleh's gone. Ulbricht's in. The team is a disaster. Sauce Gardner's hurt. Mobley's hurt. A bunch of moving parts. And the Jets defense is giving up 26.7 points per game in their last 7 games. Nothing like we expected. On the Miami side of this game, probably even better of a buy low statistically. Miami likes to pace. They score the ball at will, and they actually uncannily started 0-6 versus the over, mostly because of a Tua injury, but statistically a great buy low. They are 4-2 stints versus the over, 3-0 versus the home over last 3. They're scoring the ball at Hard Rock, 28-27 against Arizona, an over against Vegas, and a divisional over, which we did play 2 weeks ago against New England. Divisional matchup, we are data abundant. Have to go back to last year for this, but it's great line functionality. These teams did go over on Black Friday last year at MetLife Stadium, 34-13, over 40.5. Final game of the season, it was week 15. Jets at Miami last year, 30-0, under 36.5. Same stadium less than a year later, moved up to 44.5. It's going to be a shootout. It's what Miami does well. They score, they pace. Jets defense not competing at this point. I have this game to finish around 53 points. Buy it, live it, love it, and let's dominate. Guns picks, raising his hand on a
I got a prop gun take on this one, and this is something that I looked at. Line's a little bit sharp, but I think it's still a great look. I think you can look at Aaron Rodgers over on his pass attempts on this one. This is a Miami team since Tua got back. Been very good against the run, holding opponents since he's gotten back. Only one time they surpassed over 100 yards, and that was in the last game versus Green Bay. But Green Bay, heavy run-oriented team, and that was a cold environment. Miami, of course, doesn't like to play in the cold, but they're playing at home in this situation. I think with the injury to Breece Hall, who's not going to be playing this game, they're going to go with Braylon Allen. Braylon Allen doesn't have a lot of carries this year. I think they're going to be passing the ball a lot, and they have some key linemen that are hurt as well. So look for over on the pass attempts. That's a lean. I think the line is super sharp. He averages 34.5 pass attempts per game, and that's where the line is right now, right around 34, 35 on most books. So yeah, I would probably lean towards his pass attempts over. I think they're going to have to air it out versus this Miami defense.
Without question. I think great look there. An opportunity to dominate. Staying at 1 o'clock, out of division football. Highly intriguing matchup. Kirk Cousins returns to Minnesota. 1 o'clock in Minneapolis. That is noon local time up there. I got a take on this game, but I will throw it to the gun. The prop gun is engaged, coming off a lean, probably official as well. Official here. Jordan Addison under in the receiving yards market.
Oh, this is official. I've already bet this one myself. I mean, we got to look at Jordan Addison on this one. I love the under on his receiving yards today because Atlanta's defense, they're ranked second in defensive DVOA at defending the secondary receiver, only allowing 4.5 targets, but only giving up they actually give up the fewest yards to the secondary receiver, only giving up 25.9 receiving yards per day. When you look at Addison's receiving averages, 5.6 targets, 3.6 receptions, and 57.5 receiving yards per game. But the line is set at 48.5, and I've actually seen it. I think on DraftKings it was set as low as 45.5, which is 9 to 12 yards below his season average. Gives you everything you need to know from a high indicator that this is going to be an under for Madison. I think they're going to be trying to throw the ball to the primary with Justin Jefferson and hitting other targets on this one. They just defend the secondary receiver very well. So yeah, Jordan Addison under his receiving yards, 48.5 as the play.
Love it. My official in this game, another total, taking the over at 45.5. And when I started to go through this, I found actually what I perceived to be a great buy low on both teams. Minnesota comes in here 4-8 versus the over, 1-4 at home versus the over. And a really interesting schedule cluster here. Minnesota actually did start the season 1-4 versus the over, and then proceed to go 2-0 in their next two, with a huge total at home against Detroit, 31-29, and an over at the Rams, 30-20. This is the same exact spot. They come into this week's matchup 1-4 versus the over last 5, so it's a buy low. And as I mentioned, this is Kirk Cousins returning to Minnesota. Anybody who follows NFL The Extra Points or the NFL in general knows one thing about Kirk Cousins. He likes to sling the rock, and he will be slinging it against his old team today. And not only that, Atlanta uncannily is 4-8 versus the over, exactly like Minnesota, 0-4 in their last 4. But if you really go through those games, just situational stuff. A game against Dallas that went under, hit 48 points on a 51.5, 700 total yards roughly, definitely could have gone over. Even more egregiously in week 10, a game played at New Orleans. Atlanta had 468 yards in that game and only scored 17 points due to 3 missed field goals, an interception in the plus territory, and downs to close the game. That was one of the biggest outliers versus a total all year. And then the last 2 weeks, they only scored 6 points at Denver, and they only scored 13 against the Chargers. What is the situation there? AFC West, elite defenses. Denver is second in points against this year. Chargers are first. Atlanta opened the season with a similar cluster, 0-3 versus the first 3 overs, 0-4 now last 4, then proceeded to explode, going 3-0 in their next 3. And one final point on this, in terms of the offense and defensive statistics in this game, Minnesota is actually very good against the run. They're 28th in passing yards against. So Kirk's going to be wide open. And final point on this, these teams did actually play last year, which surprised me because it is out of division. It was November 5th last year, Josh Dobbs versus Taylor Heineke. But key point, it was a track meet shootout, 31-28. Neither defense competed, and books love the over here. That line was 38.5, moved up here to 45.5. I have this one to be 53 points as well. Another opportunity to dominate. Staying at 1 o'clock, big intrigue in a game that yet again should probably not have much intrigue. Carolina at Philadelphia. And I posted Carolina, and of course I get half of Philadelphia in my DMs telling me I know nothing about sports. I love you, Philadelphia. It's not personal. It's analytical. The gun agrees. Throw it to the gun. Carolina plus 14.
Yeah, we're not saying they're going to lose to Carolina. Everybody chill out. It's a big number, and I think it's too big of a number here to be taking Philly at home at Lincoln Financial Field. If you actually look at the numbers, Carolina's 3-9, but they've been playing a lot better. They're coming off that overtime loss to Tampa. Now that they had a big home stretch, now they're going on the road. Then you have Philly just running red hot, 8-game winning streak, and coming off a big game of the week type situation over Baltimore, dominated them. They're 10-2 on the year, but Philly's has a hot streak, like I said, but they've underperformed at home. 1-3 ATS in their last 4 home games. Philly has non-covers versus, get this, Jacksonville, Cleveland, Atlanta. These are teams that are not great on the road, and they played to the level of their competition. Then you have Carolina. They found some offense as of late, and I think benching Bryce Young kind of rejuvenated him in a lot of cases. They're 4-1 ATS, losing by an average of 1 point per game and 2 straight up wins since getting Bryce Young back under center. They also averaged 23 points per game in that span when they averaged 15.5 points per game prior to that. Then you got the situational sandwich that we like to take advantage of. Phillies has this game up. Then next week they got to go play Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, is a good team if you go check their record. And then they get 3 straight conference games to finish the year. So are they really thinking about this opponent? I don't think they are. Also, Philly's underperformed as a favorite this year, above 4 points. When Philly is a favorite of 5 points or more, they are 1-3 ATS in that span. But for Carolina, when they are a dog of more than 6, they're 4-2 ATS. So this is a better team in the situation from a spread perspective. I think Carolina is a buy team right now. They're playing very good ball. Their offense is improving week to week. And Canales has really done a good job with Bryce Young, and Bryce Young is getting better and better. And I think they're going to keep this game within the number, maybe a possession or less. Give me Carolina here, plus 14 as a play.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't disagree. Also officially on this early week at plus 12.5. And, people want to bet Philadelphia, go for it. But, as Gunn said, this is where Philadelphia has been really poor at home this year. 0-3 ATS, home outside of the division. And it's a brutal spot. It's really the biggest sandwich spot of their whole year, coming off of back-to-back road wins. And you get Pittsburgh and a bunch of divisional games after that. And you talk about Carolina, and we're not saying that Carolina is the next coming of the Detroit Lions, but they were so utterly terrible for such a long period of time. When you see them go 4-0 ATS last 4, and I think notably covering a home game against Kansas City and backing it up with what could have been an outright win against Tampa Bay, they have found something. Bryce Young got benched. We said on this show numerous times we thought maybe he didn't have the mental makeup to play in this league. He's undersized. Maybe didn't have the personality to lead grown men. But I think Dave Canales has connected with this kid, and he's playing better. He's playing much more confidently. He's stepping up in the pocket. He's seeing his progression clearly. I was watching the game last week late. Of course, Guns did hit that over last week late in the game, and I was watching it hoping the over would hit. And he's stepping up in the pocket like fearlessly. Whereas if you guys remember earlier this season, he was taking sacks like at an alarming rate and just subjecting himself to insane amount of pressure and physicality. So whatever happened when he sat down, he watched a lot of film. He has improved immensely. And I think maybe a shout to Andy Dalton as well, having been in the league for a period of time, played reasonably well in a limited sample, but I think he probably coaches this guy very well from the sideline. I think he's a very good mind and mentor for Bryce Young. So I think we're going to see a competitive game here. Philadelphia's in a terrible spot. They're way too hot. They've won 8 in a row. They've covered a bunch in a row. It's just where you want to buy what perceives to be a tight game here at 1 o'clock in Philadelphia. And as I said, I know people are there right now. Hopefully some of them are watching the NFL The Extra Points, and they're having beers. Cheers to you guys. We love you guys. We just see a tight game here today. Take Carolina at 12.5 early week, plus 14 now. Staying at 1 o'clock, another divisional game. A lot of divisional games in this week 14 and a lot of information. Round 2, Browns, Steelers, this time in Pittsburgh. Revenge Pittsburgh off a pretty egregious loss on Thursday Night Football in the snow a few weeks ago. We had it over then. It was very contrarian, as people said to me, and they said to Guns, it's snowing, it's weather, they won't score, and we'll be sitting here hopefully in 50 years having the same conversation saying, guys, weather means points. What else means points? Jameis Winston in 2024. Browns, Steelers, Guns picks over 43.5.
Now, I need to ask everybody in the chat, and you can say what you want in this one, but I need to ask everybody in the chat, who's the most exciting player in the NFL to watch right now? And I will say adamantly, it's Jameis Winston. Whether it's throwing a 75-yard touchdown or it's throwing 2 pick sixes, that is must-see TV every time he's on. All his speeches, he's an electric player, and I think we're going to be looking at a very high-scoring game once again in Acrisure Stadium in Pittsburgh. Cleveland's lost 3 out of their last 4. They're off that loss to Monday Night Football, driving down the field for the cover, throws a pick, absolutely got us the cover for Denver, absolutely loved it, and Pittsburgh's won 6 out of their last 7 games, just red hot right now. And with Cleveland, they're pass first. Second in pass play percentage, second in pass attempts per game, and they're 13th in passing yards per game. And if there's a vulnerability with the Pittsburgh Steelers, it's against the pass. They're 18th in opposing pass yards per game, 23rd in opposing pass attempts per game. So teams like to throw the ball because on the sheer fact that Pittsburgh has a top 5 rush defense. So that works perfectly with Cleveland because they don't like to run the ball anyways. And then you got to look at the Pittsburgh offense. Absolutely flourished with Jameis Winston at QB. They averaged 28.6 points per game since he took over the starting position. And then you got to look at Cleveland's offense, just flourished with Jameis Winston since he's come in under center, especially versus divisional opponents, where he put up 29 versus Baltimore and 24 in the previous game versus Pittsburgh. The last 3 times the last time these teams met 2 weeks ago, Cleveland won that game, like Shark alluded to, 24-19, got the over on that one, but the line was 36.5. Granted, that opened at 40.5 and steamed down, but it was still 36.5 at the closing, and you're seeing the line here total right around 43.5. That's when I got it on Friday. Cleveland is 6-1 to the over in the last 7 games, 4-1 to the over since Winston became the quarterback. Pittsburgh is favored by 6.5, 7 points in this situation. When Pittsburgh is favored by 3.5 points or more this season, the over is 3-0. And this total is the highest that Pittsburgh has as a favorite this season. And then you got to look at this is just going to be a high-scoring affair here, folks. Even sunny there. The wind gusts, not really a factor in this one. I think 5-mile-an-hour wind, so you're going to see this ball get aired out by Winston. He may even throw a couple pick sixes in there. Who knows? I know the INT over on his prop was heavily juiced, like minus 250 or 256. So it's going to be a fun game, and it's remarkable to say that about the AFC North because historically those have been rock fights, but not anymore. This is one of the most potent type of scoring conference divisions in the NFL. So we're going to take advantage here with Cleveland versus Pittsburgh. Give me the over 43.5 as the play.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. And, we talk about line functionality here in the season. The game that did go over on Thursday Night Football is 36.5. This moved up to 44.5. And this is the third total this week that I have graded to hit specifically 53 points. And as Guns mentioned, this is not historical AFC North football. This is just wide open college football style play. And I was actually watching the Hard Knocks on HBO Max last night detailing the AFC North, and I thought it was interesting because just to see the personalities and what goes on, really fantastic stuff. But not telling you guys anything you don't already know. Jameis Winston is just a massive personality to go along with his gunslinger mentality. He just has these guys amped up to ball and just have fun. And having fun offensively is by default playing a loose style. And really, just final point on this, since Russell Wilson became quarterback, the Steelers have been playing, honestly, far more explosive offensively than we're used to. 37 points at home against the Jets, 26 against the Giants, 28 on the road against Washington, the over we just talked about against Cleveland, and last week against Cincinnati, 44-38. That was the highest scoring game of the entire season. It's just how they're playing as well. This game does track to be absolutely wide open. In terms of the ATS side, I think this is actually a really tight line. As much as people want to buy the revenge on Pittsburgh, I would tell you to be careful. Revenge doesn't mean necessarily cover. It means win the game. And these guys are not thinking about necessarily winning by 7 or 8 points, which of course would be necessary to cover this spread. I think it's a very tight line. Pittsburgh did lay minus 3.5 on the road. This did open at minus 7. That for me is a game finishing right around 7 or 8 points. So take the over, by far the best look in this game. Couple more games at 1 o'clock.
One more thing too. Sorry, Shark.
No,
it's like, Here's a prop that I've taken every single week, and I'm going to continue to do it. Is Jameis Winston over his pass attempts. It's been hitting. He's hitting over. He throws the ball over 40 every single game. The only game he didn't, he threw 27 attempts versus Pittsburgh 2 weeks ago, but that was a snow game. They were a little bit more balanced trying to run the ball in that game, so there's a little caveat there, but this is kind of a redemption here for Jameis. I think he's going to air it out a lot in this game, so take the over on his pass attempts as well.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, outside of betting the game, I think this is just going to be one of those highly entertaining games to watch this weekend. So buy the over, let's cash. Staying at 1 o'clock, out of division stuff, Saints at Giants. Actually, a rematch of last year. Again, I said I was surprised to find the Falcons and the Vikings having played last year. The Saints actually did host the Giants late last year and blow out the Giants by margin 24-6. This is an interesting game, and I think there's a lot more analysis to this game than just saying it's a disaster, it's a grease fire, whatever. The Saints, when Derek Carr has played this year, are actually 4-5 ATS, so they're pretty solid, decent, and a couple of those non-covers were actually backdoors. They got backdoored against Philly at home, played Philly very tight, and also played Kansas City tight on the road until Carr did get hurt in the fourth quarter. So this team actually does perform well against the spread with Carr. I think even more notably, they are 1-0 ATS at this division. They did blow out Dallas in week 2, 44-19. And this is where we're going to, throughout the next half an hour on this show, start talking about the playoff picture more. Some of these teams who look like they're dead in the water actually have a chance to make the playoffs. New Orleans is one of them because the NFC South is so pedestrian. In this division currently, Atlanta and Tampa Bay lead the division at 6-6. So nobody's doing anything crazy. And the Saints are only 4-8. So they're only 2 back. They win today 5-8. One of those teams loses. All of a sudden they're only 1 back. Or if both lose, they're only 1 back. We don't necessarily think that the Bucs are going to lose, but that's a conversation we're about to have after this. But I think you might see a backdoor from the Saints this year. They've got some soft games. They can compete well in the division. It's a buy spot. But here's the problem with this game. The Giants are not starting Daniel Jones or Tommy DeVito. They're starting Drew Lock. And Drew Lock, 6th or 7th year, I believe, at this point out of Mizzou, is your classic backup quarterback who competes well against the number. He didn't cover last week on Thanksgiving Day at Dallas, albeit very tight, 27-20 loss on a 3.5. But if you go back to last year, Drew Lock actually did play for Seattle last year, and in 2 starts in relief of Geno Smith late in the year, he did go 2-0 ATS, covering a big line, plus 14.5 at San Francisco in December. And I think even more notably, week 15 last year at home, the Lock-led Seahawks actually beat Philadelphia outright 20-17 as a dog. So just as much as you want to buy New Orleans pretty much throughout the rest of the season, the Giants with Drew Lock will be more competitive, and the Giants are taking on an incredible statistical buy low. I made the mistake of fading the Titans going back 2 weeks against Houston. And we had said on that show, the Titans are 1-9 ATS, assuming effectively that they were never going to cover. And ultimately, they did the polar opposite of what we expected immediately and won a road game at Houston. This is a Giants team that is 2-10 ATS and 0-6 ATS at home. That is not a statistic I want to fade. It is really hard in professional football to get clean swept against the spread at home over an entire season. I feel like the Giants are just so overdue to cover a game. Again, I want to buy New Orleans. I think the line dictates a New Orleans win somewhere in the 5 or 6 range, very tight. I could see the Giants showing up here, and you don't want to continue to fade a team who's 0-6 at home. Guns, I don't know if you looked at this game in any detail. Any thoughts?
I looked at the prop market when I looked at this one. You got to look at the sheer factor that Malik Neighbors is banged up. He's got a hip issue, and what I'm reading here is that he's going to have a limited role, so he's not going to have a lot of reps in this game. So it gives me an opportunity to take maybe Wendell Robinson props, maybe on the over on his receiving, maybe over on his receptions, because Drew Lock did throw the ball last week, 32 pass attempts. Also taking some of the tight end props that I was looking at. I was looking for Darren. You want a obscure name, Daniel Bellinger. He takes over. Theo Johnson was a primary target last week for Drew Lock, but he's on the IR now. He got hurt last week, so maybe taking some of his props I'm seeing on his over receiving yards right now. I'm going to take just a quick look at that one. Daniel, you got to look for him on some books. Some books don't have it. I know a lot of the actually, if you go to FanDuel, none of the Giants receiving props are even up there right now, and I think it's on the fact that they wanted to see where Malik Neighbors was in terms of how much playing time he's going to get. So I think it's taking advantage of some of these prop opportunities here, especially knowing that Malik Neighbors is going to have a limited role today. Maybe more on, I would lean towards those. Other than that, I'm not touching the side. I'm not touching the total. The Giants, to me, are there's no good spot to buy them, in my opinion. You said it best. I know Drew Lock has done well as in the role of being a covering spreads, but I'm not into this one. I'm going to pass as far as the side and the total.
Yeah, I mean, I think of all the games at 1 o'clock, this is probably the sharpest game, both ATS and the total. It could go either way. Stay at 1 o'clock, last game at 1 o'clock. Very similar conversation. Out of division football involving a team who is out of the playoff picture. That team would be the 2-10 Raiders. Same exact record as the Giants, traveling to Tampa Bay this afternoon. I looked at this game in detail. I really had some good angles on this. Guns, any opening thoughts here?
This one, it was just a sheer pass for me, just on the sheer fact that really the Raiders are coming off kind of another magical game where Kansas City found themselves into victory. You had the Raiders driving down the field to kick the field goal, and of course they turn it over to Kansas City, lose that game. You don't know if they can lose the same game twice. That's what I'm a little bit worried about here. They're going against a Tampa team that, you talk about the NFC South and how not great they are. You could have a team that's under 500 actually win that division, really. So to me, I completely passed on this one. I think there's just better opportunities on the board today other than this game. So yeah, just a complete pass. Maybe I'll dive into the prop market after the show and see if I can find something there. But no, I'm not touching side or total on this one.
Yeah, this is a tough spot because, as we mentioned, this division is wide open. So Tampa Bay cannot afford to give away this game, but it's really a pretty brutal calendar spot for Tampa Bay. Coming off a road non-cover win in overtime against Carolina, one home game before they travel to the West Coast to play against the Chargers. So it really is a trap. And the last time they played a home game against this division, it was early season off of a road win. And they did come home and play their worst home game of the year by a mile. Outright loss, 26-7 against Denver. And I know people would say Denver and the Raiders have nothing to do with each other outside of the fact they play in the same division. But I would say this, in terms of the way the books think of these teams, at that point in the season, week 3, a young Bo Nix was actually getting 7 points at Tampa Bay. So books thought week 3 Denver was pretty much identical in weighting to week 14 Las Vegas, because this is basically the same line, 6.5, 7. And as I mentioned, Tampa Bay played an absolutely terrible football game. They are capable of this. And when you look at the Raiders have very little to play for other than pride and professionalism. But teams are not tanking. I was listening to somebody talk about this the other day. I think it was my guy Kyle Brandt on NFL Network. Shout out to him for great content. He was saying, this whole narrative that people swirl around that teams are tanking for draft picks, the players are never tanking because these guys are playing for their own careers. So you just have to remember that. No players are ever tanking. The only time a team is tanking is if they actually take their players off the field. And for lack of a better term here, this is the Raiders full roster at this point. They moved Devontae Adams. Max Crosby's still playing like, it's his last game every single game. They're coming off a really top level game at Kansas City. They get a little extra rest because that game was played on Friday. So it's not just as bad as your typical road back-to-back. And Aiden O'Connell, kind of like the Drew Lock conversation, he performs great as a road underdog in his career. He's 4-0 ATS last 4 as a starter, as an underdog on the road for the Raiders. So I think the Raiders could keep this tight. Honestly, it sounds kind of crazy. I would lean towards the Raiders in this game if I had to take a look. But just giving you guys the information that we love. Taking a breath here, 35 minutes in the books. Going to the 4 o'clock slate. Couple great games here. We got 2 more officials, actually 3, I believe. Going 4 o'clock, 4:05 in Glendale, Arizona. NFC West football, logjam division. One of the most competitive divisions in the sport in terms of 1 through 4 being right next to each other in the standings. This game has massive playoff implications. It's a revenge game for the Cardinals. It's a great buy low, and it is a collaboration official. We love Arizona, -2.5, Guns picks. Talk to me.
Yeah, I just want to answer one of the questions in the chat. Jack in the Crack, nice name there. Can I start Malik Neighbors with any confidence today? I'm going to say no, because right now everything that I'm looking at, they don't even know really if he is going to play. It's going to be a limited role, and he may not play. He may not suit up. So I just keep an eye on the injury report there. I'd probably start Jennings over that one. There's injury issues on the San Francisco front that are going to have to deal with. So I'd probably start somebody else other than Neighbors today on that sheer fact. But let's talk about this game with Seattle and Arizona. State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona, and you have Arizona off back-to-back road losses after winning 4 straight prior to that. So they're going to be hungry for a win here, going against their divisional rival here with Seattle, who's on a 3-game win streak and on the second leg of a road back-to-back. Then you have Arizona, run-oriented team, right? 10th in rush play percentage, 2nd in rush yards per play, and 6th in rushing yards per game. And they're going against a Seattle defense that is vulnerable against the run. They're 25th in opposing rush yards per play, 21st in opposing rush yards per game. And I basically like this Arizona team today just on a sheer situational cap, because you have Arizona coming off a road back-to-back where Seattle is on the second leg of their road back-to-back. The Arizona has been in this position before. And what happened in the game after their road back-to-back, they beat a red-hot Charger team in that spot. And then Arizona lost 2 games, but there are outliers tied into that. On the road versus Seattle, lost by 10, but outgained them by 12 yards. And the deciding factor in that game was a pick 6 from Seattle. And then they played Minnesota on the road. They outgained Minnesota by 133 yards, but there was 2 key interceptions in the fourth quarter that decided the factor in that game. And this is the second time Arizona is coming into a home game off a road back-to-back. And the next game, what happened? They beat a division rival in San Francisco outright as a dog, and they're a favorite here in this spot. I just think it's a good buy now spot coming off 2 losses back-to-back. Arizona's going to be hungry for a win, and they got Seattle at home with revenge. Give me Arizona here, -2.5 as a play.
Absolutely. Just jumping off it, as I said, log jam division. Seattle has the leading division at 7-5, 1 game better than Arizona and the Rams. This is basically a playoff game for Arizona, and I think really an interesting point here in terms of the dispersion of points and streaks. Seattle and Arizona have an identical point differential. They're both precisely +7. So when you see 2 teams that are a direct mirror of each other with the same point differential, and one team has a better record, it means that team has run better from a statistical variance standpoint in small windows. And you do get a beautiful buy low, sell high here, like Guns mentioned. Seattle is on a dub 3 straight up, and Arizona is on an L2. This is an elite statistical spot on Arizona. And as Guns mentioned, you get a revenge game in the division, and it's a very small window revenge game. They only played each other 2 weeks ago. So the wounds will be fresh emotionally for Arizona today. I could make an argument this is the biggest game Arizona has played in about 3 years, maybe even 4. This has a huge determination of where they go long term. And it's even bigger than that. This is actually a 6x revenge game. Seattle has beaten Arizona 6 consecutive times, obviously dating back to Cliff Kingsbury and the low point for Kyler Murray's career and also some backup quarterbacks. But I think a really nice statistical point on this as well, 6-0 straight up, only 2-4 ATS in that sample. So Seattle, what that says is that Seattle has won games and not covered, which means oftentimes they've gotten very fortunate in these small window point dispersion areas. And as Guns mentioned, a couple pick sixes in the first game. And this is where Arizona actually is performing much better at home this year. 2-0 ATS at home, coming off of a prior outright road loss. This is really an elite spot here at 405. Take Arizona at -2.5, and let's dominate. 2 more games at 425. I think games that were originally scheduled to be big-time games, you could make an argument the Bills-Rams is still fairly big-time. Obviously, Josh Allen really reverting back to top form. Rams here at 6-6, kind of hanging in the middle of mediocrity. I got some notes on this one. Guns, any props, side or total?
Yeah, I was actually looking at the Cooper Kupp under on his receiving yards. That was something that I was eyeing in on before the show because the line is set like 6 or 7 yards under his season average on that one. And if you actually look how Buffalo defends the primary receiver this year, they've done very well. And you have Cooper Kupp that it came off an absolute electric factory game versus the Detroit Lions in the previous game. I think he had 21 targets and 150 whatever receiving yards in this one. So he's coming off a big game, but you have to understand when you look at the Detroit Lions, the Lions are terrible at defending the primary receiver. They're one of the worst in the NFL for that matter, which is kind of remarkable knowing how good Detroit is. But in this situation, I think that he's going to have a little bit of a skid. I think they're going to try to get the ball more to Puka Nacua and the other targets on this one. And like I said, Buffalo just defends the primary receiver better than anybody in the NFL. So I think under on his receiving yards is probably a look there for Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, I like that. And this, in my opinion, this could go either way. I'm not giving you the reasoning as to why. Buffalo is obviously extremely hot. 10-2 straight up, 7-0 straight up last 7, 5-1 ATS last 6. But Buffalo, honestly, starting at the end of last year, caught momentum. And it's kind of like the conversation we've had with Detroit over and over. It's not that big of a sample. You know, you closed last year with a winning streak. Now you've won 10. This could continue for a team that's finding Josh Allen really playing top ball. I don't necessarily think this is a fade spot. You could make an argument it's a look ahead because Buffalo does play at Detroit next.
Ooh, yeah.
Huge game. But I'm not sure how much of a look ahead that really is because Detroit and Buffalo are not rivals. I mean, I get it. It could be a Super Bowl matchup, but there's not like prerequisite anger from past matchups, which is what usually makes it even more of a look ahead. And I think this is equally of a look ahead for the Rams. The Rams actually play at San Francisco on Thursday Night Football in 4 days. So you got to come back here and catch really an elite level Buffalo team before a divisional game in 4 days on the road. Really not a great spot at all. And speaking statistically, very transparent stuff here actually for both sides of this game numerically. This year, Buffalo on the road outside of the division is 0-2 as an underdog, got hammered at Baltimore and lost at Houston, and they're 2-0 as a favorite outside the division on the road. They beat Seattle on this same exact number in this division, in this time zone, -3.5, and it wasn't an outlier game. They dominated 445 yards versus only 235 for Seattle. And the other time they were a road favorite outside of the division at Indianapolis in week 10, 30-20. Again, dominated the yardage, 415 to 361. And if you look at the Rams have been hot, 4-2 ATS last 6, but the Rams are 1-2 ATS as a home dog outside of the division. So what I'm telling you here is when books like Buffalo as a favorite on the road in the spot, they cover. And when books don't like the Rams in this spot as a home underdog, they don't cover. Only cover came against Minnesota in a short week spot for Minnesota on Thursday Night Football. And final point on this numerically, these teams actually did meet in the opener 2 years ago, It was September 8th, 2022, Thursday Night Football for the Super Bowl champ. And if you remember, the Rams actually were the defending champs at that point.
Buffalo
How
smoke.
precipitously they have fallen. Good. What'd you say?
Didn't Buffalo win that game by a ton?
Exactly. Yep. And I was going to say, you think about where this Rams team has gone. They win the Super Bowl. Aaron Donald surprisingly retires. It's not the same team. They're definitely kind of in that middle ground of mediocrity. And books do like Buffalo more than they did that night. Buffalo did win that game 31-10, -2.5. Same stadium 2 years later. Buffalo opened at -4.5. So they're not looking at revenge. It's an upward movement for Buffalo. I have Buffalo to win this game by 7 points and 1 point on the total. That game 2 years ago, there were 7 turnovers in the game. Crazy, crazy stuff. Books like the under here, 44 points. I think Buffalo wins. I think it goes under. It is a great conversation. Staying at 425. As I mentioned, 2 425 games here. I'm not sure who has the A group from Fox. Obviously, Brady and Burkhardt there. Probably in LA, maybe in San Francisco, because I know early season projections had the A team talking about Caleb Williams. We'll talk about Caleb Williams. This is a Bears team that needs a win, and I think is trending up. Couple real tight losses in a row. Just fired their coach. Interesting timing to fire the coach as the team seemed to be improving, but I think it was because he mismanaged the late game so poorly on Thanksgiving Day where they should have kicked a field goal, ended up losing. Anyway, I got some notes on this. Guns, any thoughts?
Yeah, when we talked about the show, I think we talked ourselves into a prop, right? With Isaac, was it Guerendo? Yeah, Guerendo, the running back. When you look at the 49ers, they're banged up all over the place. No Trent Williams, no Nick Bosa, and of course they lost 2 of their running backs, and now Isaac Guerendo gets to step in and take over the role. You see his rushing yards sitting here at 70.5 right now, and there's a good reason for it. When he actually did play, there's 2 samples of that one. He played against Seattle. He had 10 carries, 99 yards, and granted, he had a 76-yard run in that spot. But the one barometer that I like to look at, you got to look at a bad rush defense, which Chicago has. Chicago's ranked 30th in rush DVOA, defending the running back here. But when you look at Dallas, bad rush team, right? He put up 14 carries, 85 yards, 6.1 yards per carry. His longest run was 19 yards. So I think there's an opportunity to go. And Shark said it before the show. I guess he had one of the fastest 40 times in the combine when he came out, drafted. He's a 4th-round pick in 2024. So I think there's going to be an opportunity for Isaac Guerendo to come and step in here and take over that, get more rush attempts on this one. I'd probably take his over on his rush attempts, and I definitely am going to be on his rushing over here today at 70.5. So give it to me all day long. Isaac Guerendo over 70.5 rushing yards.
Yeah, completely agree. When you look at this, the only game in recent history he's gotten a lot of carries, I'm seeing at least, and you mentioned it, at Dallas or versus Dallas, 14 carries for 85 yards, 6.1 average. Yep. And as you mentioned, another game where he busted off a 76-yard run. He is explosive. Louisville product. I believe he had the top 40 time at the combine, certainly the top 40 time for running backs. And I was watching the game last week in Buffalo. That speed just hits the hole faster. And it's in a really close proximity sport where there's not a lot of space and the gaps close incredibly quickly. That extra quarter second is immense. So I think this is an elite play. I'm jumping on it officially as well. I haven't put it in myself. I want to look at a couple books. What was the number you said you got, Guns?
Yeah, it's 70.5 right now. I think we can shop around, maybe find something a little bit lower. But I think seeing that number as high as it is, he's actually, in terms of rushing props in that game, he's higher than everybody, including DeAndre Swift for Chicago, who's set at 54.5. That gives you such an indicator. This kid has not played a lot this season, but when he's come in there, he's done his job, and I think that line is telling you that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at a line around 70 or 75 or something, he's only got 246 rush yards on the whole year.
Yeah.
So they're basically waiting the entire season, like 1 quarter today. I mean, this is so incredibly strong. And as we said, it's a great look. So we're going to finalize it. I will post the number I get, but officially on over there. Talking about the game, I've seen people on Chicago this week, and I've seen people on San Francisco. And I think this game is very hard to figure out for numerous reasons. Both teams have underachieved drastically. And when you look at Chicago, firing Eberflus, in my opinion, made more sense last year because they looked so awful for most of last year. Of course, did catch some win late season and win some home games. This year, this team is actually, I mean, they've been competitive for weeks. You know, they took a ridiculous Hail Mary loss at Washington. They lost by 3 at Detroit. They've played teams real tight, missed a field goal against Green Bay. Point is, Chicago's trending up. And we were looking at this interim coach, Thomas Brown, younger guy, 38 years old, was a running back for Georgia, actually, 2004 to 2007. Was an assistant on the Rams Super Bowl team we were just discussing in 2021. So he has Super Bowl pedigree in terms of being on a staff. And I think also key point, being under Sean McVay. You know, we've talked about this numerous times. Bill Belichick, the GOAT, his assistants have been awful as head coaches because Belichick was pretty much every aspect of the room. The coach, the energy, the scheme, the offense, defense, everything. McVay, his assistants have translated far better. I think McVay is more of a hands-on guy. He's very conversational. He's very passionate. Kevin O'Connell being a great example of this. And I think people that were assistants under McVay, obviously still very young in the game, will be great head coaches going forward. I think this Thomas Brown guy could really juice it up. Offensive coordinator, seems like a real passionate guy. Definitely a shift from Eberflus, who, in my opinion, was just a little blasé. I never felt like he was really the dog in the room that teams need. So I think it's going to improve the team. San Francisco is just hard to figure out. A lot of injuries. Bosa's out. I think Lenoir is still out. A couple other guys. San Francisco, crazily enough, if they could somehow figure out a way to win this game, is still right there in the division. And if they get some of these defensive players back, I think Christian McCaffrey is probably done for the year. But as we said, Isaac Guerrero could easily step in and just become elite very quickly. So not as worried about that. This defense will get their players back. If they could somehow steal this one this afternoon and go 6-7 and then beat the Rams on Thursday Night Football in what we said is a terrible spot for the Rams, that's all of a sudden 7-7. And they're right there in the division. So I don't like fading San Francisco. I don't like fading Chicago. A lot of narrative points there. Deep intrigue. This will be a great game to watch. Take Isaac Guerrero over in the yards market. A collaboration official.
The lowest one that I found was I didn't mean to cut you off, Shark, but the lowest I just did a little quick shop around for Isaac Guerrero rushing yards, and if you go to DraftKings, for example, it's set at 72.5. I found 70.5. I think that's the lowest line that I found so far on his props on FanDuel.
Okay, so we'll go official 70.5 over Isaac Guerrero. Let's dominate. Tonight's game, 8 o'clock, 8:20 at Arrowhead. These are the games that you wait around all year for. AFC West divisional game, Chargers, Chiefs. Chargers with Harbaugh, Chiefs are the two-time champs. You get a massive revenge game here. I'm going to throw it to the gun for some comments. I need a sip of water. Guns, talk to me on this game, and then I'll dive into it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the tried and true with when you look at the Kansas City angle. They just play within the level of their competition, but you have this Charger team that has a bit of a revenge. They lost 17-10 in that game, only putting up 224 yards of total offense, minus 105. I was outgained by 105 yards in that game. But that was at home, and with Kansas City, they tend to travel. But when they play at home, they play to the level of their competition. I think this is going to be a great opportunity for a Charger team that has just improved since that game. I mean, they were off back-to-back losses, lost to Pittsburgh, and then they lost to Kansas City. And then all of a sudden they started winning. They won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They've gone 6-2 straight up in their last 8 since that game they lost to Kansas City. I think they're going to come in here and step up in the second leg of their road back-to-back. Situationally, they've only had one other occurrence where they lost a close one to Arizona on the road off the second leg of a road back-to-back. But that was out of conference. This is in conference type of play here. This is a big game for the Chargers. On the Kansas City side, I asked everybody, I was like, do they really need this game? No. They're kind of sitting in a pretty cushy position right now as the number 1 seed. in going towards the playoffs. Granted, we still have weeks of games left here, but I think it's a great opportunity to take the Chargers. I'm going to cap this today, and the only play I'm going to be on here is the side, and I'm going to be looking towards the Chargers in the points.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about it. I'm officially on it. You will be officially on it, I assume. And let's dominate. Just jumping off it. As you said, this is really a Chargers spot to really uptick in the division. 8-4 straight up, 8-4 ATS, which is a key point. When they cover, they win outright. And I actually foresee a Chargers outright win tonight. And I think coincidentally, but also beautifully, Arizona divisional 6x revenge. Chargers divisional 6x revenge. So this is a peak generational window uptick to win outright. And as I said with the Seattle spot, Kansas City has not been covering against the Chargers. They've just been winning. And even more notably, in Justin Herbert's career, with a far worse coaching regime under Brandon Staley, actually is 3-1 ATS at Arrowhead, 2-2 straight up at Arrowhead. And that was versus more angry, more focused versions of Kansas City. And as Guns mentioned, Kansas City is purely just cratering down. They're 0-6 ATS last 6. And this is not the type of team you're buying low. You can just see it just gets more and more mediocre every week. Overtime win at home against Tampa Bay. Probably should have lost to Denver at home. Denver missed a chip shot field goal at the buzzer. Margin loss at Buffalo. Barely beat Carolina on the road by 3 points as a significant favorite. And got away with it last week, too, against the Raiders. So, again, this whole idea that people circle on Gambling X, Instagram, Twitter, or, all these social media apps, not everything's a bounce back. Some teams are purely just going straight down. And when you're just getting away with it this tight every single game, this is really speaking to an outright loss. And speaking of just the numbers of this, Kansas City did beat the Chargers early season in Los Angeles in week 4, 17-10. Key point, Kansas City was a -7.5 road favorite. When you're a road favorite in the division, you should come back inflated at home, not deflated. And this has moved down, open -3.5. This has the Chargers per line functionality to win outright by 4 points. And this really is an elite spot at 820 for Harbaugh and the boys to turn up and dominate.
You look at Kansas City and the rest of their schedule too. They don't have a cupcake schedule to finish the year. After this game, they have 3 road games out of 4, and they got to play at Cleveland, at Pittsburgh, at Denver, and then they got to play Houston. It's like they got an absolute gauntlet ahead of them. We could see, you have this team that's got 1 loss all year, been lucky on a lot of their wins. You could see a lot of straight up losses coming up in the future for this team. Like we said, this Kansas City team is cratering down. We could see an absolute skid here, a la the Eagles, from last year. We could see something like that going into the playoffs, which is kind of remarkable.
When you were just saying that, I was literally about to say it reminds me precisely of the Eagles last year.
Great minds, man.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the shark in the gun. Here we are live on a Sunday. It is an opportunity to dominate. And just speaking about it even further, just looking at the Chiefs in terms of what's going on in this division, I think this is extremely interesting stuff. Not only in the division, but within the conference. Kansas City has the best record in the conference. They have the 6th best point differential. You know how hard that is to do? Have the best outright record, the 6th best. Just to give you a couple points on this, Buffalo is 1 game behind the Chiefs. Buffalo is plus 131 point differential. The Chiefs are only plus 54. The Bills are almost 80 points better, and they're 1 game worse. And even in this division, which is even more fascinating, the Chiefs have the 3rd worst point differential in this division. They're 3 games clear of the Chargers, 3.5 clear of Denver. KC plus 54, Chargers plus 72, Denver plus 71. I mean, this is incredible, incredible stuff here.
And the Chargers have a weak schedule to finish too. You see who they have to play: New England, the Raiders. Denver's going to be a tough one, but they're going to play Tampa at home. So this is a game where they could just throw the kitchen sink out and kind of just coast into and win a bunch of games after that. So we may see a paradigm shift in the AFC West by the end of the season. It's going to be fun to watch.
Absolutely. 1 hour in the books. Talk Monday Night Football very briefly. A disastrous game, ultimately. And, it's just the intrigue of not only professional football, but life in general. When this game was scheduled, Bengals at Cowboys, we thought Joe Burrow probably over 500. The Cowboys at home in prime time, probably good at home. Well, here we are in week 14. Dallas has been terrible at home, and they are on a backup quarterback. And the Bengals have been terrible across the board, losing tight game after tight game with absolutely no quality on the defensive side of the ball. And something that I find to be incredibly interesting, the only other time Joe Burrow played in Dallas in his career, it was against Cooper Rush. You can't even script this stuff. It was a couple years ago in the early weeks, I believe week 2 or week 3, 2022. And the Cowboys did beat the Bengals with Cooper Rush. And you go back to this Cooper Rush conversation, the guy has been a covering machine throughout his career. He's 1-1 this year ATS. I believe he was 5-1 ATS 2 years ago. I honestly think the Cowboys might find some wind here with this guy and cover this game, not only because he's been covering his whole career, but I think the last week when Cincinnati lost a tight one at home to Pittsburgh, that was the nail in the coffin. They had a chance last week. As I said, I was watching the AFC North Hard Knocks show, which shed some light into the psychology of that game. Zach Taylor, I had never listened to him talk. He was emphasizing in the team meetings just how much last week was a rebirth game. They were off a bye week. He said, this is a new beginning. We win this one, we have a chance to really control our destiny going forward. They lost. Now they don't control their own destiny. It was a huge letdown. They were down 17 points in the second half. The defense was an absolute sieve. They couldn't protect Burrow. Burrow played yet another great football game and had 2 turnovers, both because he had a lack of protection, and the pass rush just got to him before he could get the ball out. Point is, Cincinnati is not a well-crafted roster. Their defense is terrible. Their O-line has some holes in it. And I think Dallas psychologically, as I said, rallies around Cooper Kupp. But also some of the quotes that I've heard from Dallas backing McCarthy, which I don't agree with, but I think just psychologically, it speaks to the fact that the group actually doesn't dislike the guy, and they are getting back together, if you will, as opposed to just disintegrating into the abyss. And that's where I think Cincinnati is. I think they're disintegrating into the abyss. So I think that Dallas could absolutely cover this game on Monday Night Football. Guns, any thoughts?
I'm probably going to look towards the total on this one, because if you look at these two teams, you know there's going to be a lot of scoring in this one. And like what Burrow has had to do, which is pretty. I mean, Burrow statistically, in my opinion, is having MVP-esque type of statistics. However, his team is terrible because on the defensive side of the ball, they can't stop anybody. And you say, like, well, they're going. Cooper Rush can't really play. It's like, well, look at his last 2 games. Granted, they were against divisional opponents, but they put up 34 and 27 in those wins. Why can't they do the same thing here versus the Bengals? I think we're looking dead fast at it over. We know that the Bengals can score points. They can't stop anybody. In the last 3 games, they've given up 35, 34, and 44. And I know that Dallas isn't the greatest team in the world, but they do have weapons. They do have a good running back, and they have a quarterback that can actually sling the ball. He's averaging 56 attempts, 33 attempts, and 36 attempts in his last 3 games in passing. So you know they're going to try to air it out here. I think it's going to be a very high-scoring affair here on Monday Night Football. I'm leaning towards the over. I haven't been there officially, but that's probably the direction I'd want to go with this game.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. And just one final point. We talk about buy lows. Like the Titans were 1-9. They started to uptick. Giants are 0-6 at home. It's hard to get clean swept in your home stadium. Dallas has been so awful at home this year. They are due statistically to continue an upward path to close the season. It's going to be a big energy. I know DCC will be in the building. Beautiful women on a Monday night down there in Dallas. And I think Dallas probably gets the job done in another really high-scoring back and forth affair. That's the show for this week. NFL, the extra points, the big show, week 14, Sunday, December 8th, 2024. My 6 top plays: Jets, Miami over 44.5, Atlanta, Minnesota over 45.5, Carolina plus 12.5, 14 now, Arizona minus 2.5, Chargers plus 4, and a collaboration official with the gun, a prop, Isaac Guerrero over 70.5 yards. The gun under Jacksonville, Tennessee, 40, under Jordan Addison receiving yards, 48. Collaboration, Carolina, 48.5, correct. Mm-hmm. Collaboration official, Carolina plus 14. Cleveland, Pittsburgh over 43.5, which I also co-sign. And Arizona, another collaboration, minus 2.5. And we believe the gun will be on Chargers in the late night game at plus 4. A game we expect the Chargers to win outright. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us on this Sunday morning. I think the apps were lagging for a little bit across X. I noticed people were not catching the feed early on. I'm going to reshare it throughout the next hour and a half. It is an opportunity to dominate. Guns Picks, a pleasure as always. Close them out with some words, and let's dominate.
Yeah, shout out to the Jet, Jabaka, Peter Grasnias, Sean Murphy, Chris Boucher, Jack in the Crack, Stephen Harrison, and all you beautiful bastards that join us here today. Lex Joseph, Dabby Cab in the building. Shout out to him. And Jack J. Scott joining us as well. I appreciate everybody that's joined us, whether you're watching, whether you're in the chat. Please like and subscribe to the Gunspix channel. Please like and subscribe to the Shark Waters Nation channel, and go follow us on X if you haven't done so already, at Sharkin Sports 88 and at Gunspix, GUNZPICKS. And just keep checking us out on the channel. We'll be back on Thursday for the Extra Point Show. Not going to be any knowledge for college this week. Why? Because there's only 2 games to really talk about. I may do a pick video or something like that, but we'll be back the next week to talk college football playoffs, because it's going to be an electric time here with bowl season. So let's cash some tickets. Let's dominate the bowl. And as always, let's keep dancing. Click, 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 click. Yeah, bang.